most contradictory things that arose in this report was the time in which the mother, Juditha Brown, allegedly last talked to her daughter. According to this report, Louis Brown told the coroner's investigator, Claudine Ratcliffe, that his daughter, Nicole Brown Simpson, was last known to be alive at 11 o'clock that evening talking to her mother.
There are records that show that Nicole Brown Simpson called her mom at or about 11 p.m. on the night she was murdered. If indeed she called and was murdered sometime after 11 p.m., Mr. Simpson points out in his lawsuit that that is an ironclad alibi. Why? Because he was on the airplane heading for Chicago.
That information was never revealed in either the criminal or the civil case. What makes you so sure that such a record does exist?
One thing for certain, it would be impossible for the Browns to have driven down to Dana Point, almost 75 miles away from Brentwood, within an hour in which Marcia Clark submitted in O.J. Simpson's criminal trial and Dan Petrocelli unwittingly submitted in the civil trial.
Barry, it is inconceivable to me that if these records existed and the job of the defense was to prove that Simpson did not commit the crime or could not have committed the crime, that they didn't get those records in the criminal case.
Marcia Clark pulled Lou Brown's lapel and told him that we got a problem with 11 o'clock. So a week later, on June the 20th, he returned to the coroner's office and said he might have made a mistake and that 11 o'clock wasn't the actual time and maybe it was closer to 9:30.
It's so ridiculous.
Marcia Clark and company said the phone call was made at 9:30. The last phone call was made at 9:37. You're saying it was 11 o'clock. Robert Shapiro says 10:37, if I'm correct. How hard is it to get a phone record?
We've been to state court, federal court. We're probably going back to federal court because the matter was unripe.
The GTE in California is claiming that under the California Public Utility Law, that in order to turn over a consumer's telephone records, that a court order is required, and in addition, the consent of the party.
Number one, the Browns' phone records were subpoenaed by the people of the state of California. They belong to the people of the state of California. There is no privacy issue here. Those records were subpoenaed and received by the California Superior Court, and presently they are stolen out of O.J. Simpson's sealed criminal files as well as the subpoenas for those records.
The phone records are admitted into evidence. These very phone records, it's my assumption, as Exhibit 26 by Mr. Petrocelli. That was admitted into evidence. So what's the question here?
Well, the official copy of the GTE phone records was never entered into evidence.
They were originally brought to Division 48 for the criminal trial. They were sealed by Judge Powell. Subsequent to that, there's no record in any court file, civil trial, criminal trial where they were ever unsealed.
These records seem to indicate a 10:17 call. These records indicate a 9-minute and a 9:37 call and a 9:43 call.
Not only was this telephone record introduced into the trial, although it was never admitted as evidence, but as you point out, Simpson's own defense teams in both the criminal trial, Nancy, and also in the civil trial, stipulated to the time of Juditha's phone call to her daughter, Nicole.
And just for the audience, what does the stipulation mean? What does stipulation mean?
The stipulation means that there was an agreement about that. You know, there was an agreement about what the time was, and the time of the phone call was roughly about 9:40.
In the civil trial, the telephone records were stipulated to. That jury never got an opportunity to look at the telephone records. I've never heard of such. They didn't look at the telephone records in the criminal trial, and they didn't look at the records in the civil trial. There's something going on with this case.
I mean, they were produced, but they were stipulated to. That means all parties agreed. The records show this. The records show there was a phone call made at 9:44 p.m. by Nicole to her mother.
9:44.
Back and forth. They had phone calls.
But the judge saw it.
Yeah, the judge saw it, and not only did the judge see it, but she sealed the evidence, and she refused to even have the transcripts released from her and Marcia Clark, as well as Bob Shapiro's conversation in the judge's chamber.
Well,
you didn't know about those records?
You know, Dan. Where were we?
You mean we've had 2 trials for nothing?
Ridiculous.
You mean there were these ironclad records that completely exonerated Simpson and we haven't known about them?
During that in-chambers conference, Shapiro stipulated that the call was made at 10:17. and then 6 months later, he flips over and says, well, I'll go along, the call was made at 9:37.
Gloria, what do you make of this coroner's report that shows that the coroner states that he believes that Nicole was talking on the phone at 2300 hours or 11 o'clock?
I think all of this may be part of an effort just to plant more doubt in the minds of the American public, but the majority of the American public has made up their mind. They agree with the civil verdict that he killed with malice.
It's only 4 hours of the Browns' phone records, and why is everybody behaving like they have something to hide? Everybody that believes in O.J.'s guilt is afraid to see the phone records.
Gloria, have you seen those phone records?
I haven't seen the phone records, but you know what? I don't need to see the phone records because the attorneys saw them in both cases. The jury has made their decision that in the civil case that Mr. Simpson is liable.
What would be the harm to take a look at the real records and put this to rest? In fact, if the real records are against O.J. Simpson, why would he be searching for them? Why would we be asking for them? It would be to everyone's benefit to take a look at what's true. That's all we're about. We don't know what's in there until we take a look at it. It's a simple right of access.
If you're the Browns and you know that you're right on this issue, do you wonder why they don't just release them?
Absolutely. This is a critically important issue. If Nicole was alive at 11 o'clock and making a phone call with her mother at 11 o'clock, O.J. could not have killed her because he was entering his limo and in his limo at that time. So it's critical.
And what I don't understand is why everybody is afraid to show the official copy of the telephone records. I mean, the Browns could have given these records some time ago.
This family has been through enough in having their son-in-law murder their daughter. They can keep those phone records as long as they want.
You know, we're not doing this just for the sake of it. We're concerned about justice in this country.
Say I'm not going to be a dancing monkey. No, you don't get it, Mary.
Susan,
no, this is a
did
about
a jury find him innocent or not?
Yes, they did.
That was the verdict.
Listen, you are absolutely right. We have to live with that verdict so that he can go and live in his...
O.J.
Well, oh,
this
yes,
is not
it is.
about O.J.
Mary, this is about O.J. being able to live in his white world.
Why would a court system help cover up and keep from Mr. Simpson the telephone records which would prove his total innocence?
Friends, what this case really is that O.J. would like to return to what he perceives to be a white world. Go back and live
we know
in
racism
Brentwood.
won't allow that.
Excuse me. You know, I'd like to know why O.J. only will date white women and not black women. Does that trouble you at all, Mary?
No, it does not.
Oh, okay, well,
freedom of choice.
Well, I agree with you, but then why
What problem do you have with that, Susan?
That has nothing to do with anything.
I have absolutely no problem with it. The problem
obviously
do. Excuse me, Mary. I have no problem with it. The problem I have
You bring it up all the time.
I've never brought it up, but Mary,
yes,
let me tell you.
And as long as certain segments of the public believe O.J. is innocent, and they do, especially as against the background of the revelations about police crookedness in L.A.
The fallout from the LAPD corruption scandal.